in both of these dances that we were looking at. I think they both did a really good job of playing to their strengths.
Yep. Agreed.
And it created two totally different dances to the same song.
Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 24 years and I have about 26. And tonight we're actually doing something a little more in detail than we have been recently. We're doing a comparison between two dances to the same song, both champion level dances, and we're going to take a look at the difference between technique and making choices.
Very excited about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we won't be here for 3 hours because we easily could be.
Yeah.
So we're going to start by watching both videos, but I'll put one in the chat for now. We're going to watch Nick King and Victoria Hank from Bridgetown 2017. Link in the chat. When you're done, I'll give you the link to the other video.
Does Forrest say Nicktoria at the end?
He does. And I'm not mad about it. It's funny. I'm here for it. And yes, Aaron, my knees hurt too. That was leg day for both of them.
Yeah.
So this next video is Ben Morris and Tori Zowie, Swingserland 2017. The second song. There are two dances in this video, and it's the second one. So give it a watch, and then we'll get to analyze it. I have some preamble. Do you have some preamble?
Probably. I'll let you go first.
All right, cool. So first, we're going to be talking about the difference between technique and choices. And in order to do that, definitions are likely helpful. So technique is how you achieve something. Choices are the things that you choose to try to achieve, especially at the champion level. And I would also think, like, in my opinion, at the all-star level, like anyone in finals, in theory, should be there because their technique is fantastic. We all can agree that their technique is great. You may not artistically like the choices a dancer makes, but you can look at them and be like, yeah, that technique is great. I cannot fault them for how they're going about what they're doing. I just don't like the choices they're making. But that's an opinion thing, right? That's not an objective thing. What I see a lot of times is people conflating the two, being like, oh, that choice was awesome. But like, if you can see the technique and you're like, but the technique was real bad. That's not good.
Yeah.
Just because in my opinion, choices cannot trump technique.
I would agree with that.
So what we're looking at today is like, these are both champion level dances. The technique, for the most part, absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really seeing how it's the choices that are making these dances or breaking the turn. Over to you.
I was going to talk about general structure of the dances. They're actually both very similar in terms of like what they're hitting, the movements that they're choosing. It's really just what they're actually doing with it that's the difference. And I think that's actually a really important thing, that they're choosing to do a similar structure, because you don't necessarily have to use this exact structure to the same song, structure to it, but don't necessarily have to do it, in the same way. So I think that it makes it easier to compare. And they are also making some similar choices, but it looks different on both of the pairings. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to say, a main difference in terms of technique for the two pairings is how much they're traveling. And Victoria are not doing a ton of traveling in their like basics. They're doing some for like kind of passing things, but Ben and Tori are doing a lot more traveling throughout their basics. So they're taking up more of the floor. That is a technique thing, but it's not like level technique. That's more of like they're choosing to do their technique that way. That specifically is like a choice in techniques that they're using, because when you're wanting to travel something, you do your technique a little bit differently than you do if you're wanting to stay in place more. Technically, like kind of both. It's a choice, but it's also technique. But I think that in general, that's kind of the only part of it that's like really melded. I think the rest of it is kind of either a technique piece or a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Doodle-doodle-doo.
is that they're both making?
It's fantastic. So I guess
we are starting out with like the beat drop of the music right after it says, yeah, we got the boom pow, and it comes in with the beat. So that's where we're starting for both dances. It's that through the first verse of the song that we're going to look at.
at the very opening between the two.
So, yeah, so the difference is that Nick and Victoria were just starting with this song, and these guys were starting from another song. This is a song two for them. As you can see, like, we're already kind of starting to make different choices just right off the back, because we're already traveling over here. But with Nick and Victoria, they were just kind of staying in one spot and moving it like level wise. Both are fun ways to start.
Because we talk about that all the time. Like the way you start, especially a spotlight, makes a huge difference for the tone of the rest of the dance. Because escalate, you start with everything right at the beginning. It's really hard to escalate even more from there, for example.
Yeah. So Nick and Victoria are choosing to hit kind of more of the intricate musical things that are happening, and Ben and Tori aren't doing that quite as much. They're kind of just smoothing things out, and then Tori hits the first like hit in the music that happens.
About counts, Ben and Tori are adding their musicality within the context of normal patterns, whereas Nick and Victoria are adding counts to normal patterns.
Like a starter step basically for here. And this is the first beat where Tori kind of hits that tuck with her little kickback. These two were just starting out with basically like a starter step and then like a sugar tuck and just like a little stylized hit on that. And then moving into something that's a more rotational pattern. And Nick and Victoria were starting with that like level change that they were doing. And then Victoria hits that first little beat by doing like a little hitch, basically.
I love her face. She makes she does. That's so cute.
Even though they chose to start out differently, they're progressing it also, and they're kind of going into a similar, like where they're going into that tuck, which is I like that choice. It's kind of keeping it basic initially. Out, keeping it really chill.
Talking about before we moved here to the screen share, like Nick is keeping the slot from traveling or getting long, whereas Ben is letting it travel.
Yeah. And so you can see like the difference in between kind of the technique on Tori and Victoria. Ooh.
Yes. You combine them and you get a new pasta shape. Toria. I am so sorry. Please fire me.
I feel like I'm gonna have a problem with those two names. Anyways, so the difference you can really see the length of the stride that Tori is taking is much longer than Victoria because of how much is traveling.
One of the things that's so cool about West Coast Swing is that it allows for a variety of technique to be correct. So like in general, Tori's basic travels further than Victoria's basic. Ben is very malleable in that he can dance lead a basic that doesn't travel, and he can lead a basic that does travel. Nick also can do both, but he leans toward leading a basic that doesn't travel as much. And all of those are correct within the boundaries of West Coast swing. The way you create those to be correct, that's where the technique really comes in. Understanding which one you're trying to accomplish is really important. Or if you're the kind of dancer that's like, yeah, I want to be able to do both, like Ben, technically can do both. It's a bounce between them more often than the others. If you want to be someone that does both, that means you have to be good at even more technique. And if you want to be someone who does both, you need to know when to use one and why.
Yeah, agreed. And I would also add that in general, it's going to be smarter to use less traveling when you're like social dancing, especially if there's a lot of people on the floor, and you're going to want to be doing more traveling when you're in a spotlighted situation if you're competing, because you generally will have a large floor, and like whether it's routines or like Jack and Jill strictly is like you want to use up that floor as much as you can because it makes it more visually interesting. It gets kind of boring if you have a whole floor around you and you're just in one spot. So it's good to at least work on using more traveling when you're doing spotlights or working on spotlights.
I move on to the next section in each one.
Yes. Very short. Kind of like a there's like one level to it, right? There's not a lot of variety happening within the music. And I like that Ben and Tori are choosing to show that visually by kind of keeping like a continuous travel. And there's not a lot of contrast in their movements. It's all fairly similar. Tori's obviously accenting a little bit, but it's not huge. And then this is when we get into like the chorus. But
right. Same section of music, but with Nick and Victoria.
Yeah. So Nick and Victoria are doing a little bit more when we're getting to the bridge here, right? Because they're doing a little trickery of sorts. Not sure what you want to call that.
I don't know.
Weight supported
Victoria,
mask. I don't know.
I mean, Victoria, like most of the champion follows, they can do weight support with very little need for support. Like Victoria, I know, turns into a feather when she does stuff like that. It's quite impressive.
But so they're choosing to kind of do it a little differently in the sense that once she kind of gets through that little weight supported piece, they kind of just do like a little bit of basics. Like they're not trying to do too much here, and they don't really accent anything. They just kind of move through it. So they're kind of showing it in a different way than like Ben and Tori, right? Because Ben and Tori are showing that like level, not changing music by having that consistent traveling, right? And Victoria and Nick are showing the same thing by just kind of dialing it down and going back to a basic, but not accenting anything. And because Ben and Tori are still accenting a little bit in it, not a lot, but they're still accenting a little bit, and Nick and Victoria aren't.
Right.
Like we have a little arm flourish, and Tori does this little thing when it says "in your eyes." Volume is being shown in different ways.
But they both escalate to another hit once the bridge is over. So Tori does another squat, and then we get this. Is there a name for those?
I'm not sure.
Wow, that's like extra alarming in slow motion. Like, I know the physics is going to work out, but there's a few frames here where you're like,
Yeah.
something else could be happening.
Both choose to hit the like the break at the start of the chorus very differently. Victoria, we're getting that partnered large movement. And here we're getting contrast from Tori and Ben. Sorry.
Tori,
So here
Toria.
we contrast from Tori and Ben because they were initially for that bridge, they were traveling a lot and really keeping the movements kind of smooth. But instead of that, we're getting Tori being kind of highlighted, having her moment, and they're stopping their traveling. There's not any momentum. She's dropping all that momentum down when she is going into a little squat she does.
I love Ben's attitude about call and response because it can be so awkward as a follow when you do this really cool thing.
Yeah.
And if you are being super feminine about it or sexy about it, you do this really cool thing. And then for your leader to go and try to do the exact same thing just feels awkward and uncomfortable most of the time. So I love how Ben spin on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like Ben and Nick have similar vibes in what they're going for with this dance. They're both doing some call and response stuff, but just because they have very different follows, Ben is choosing to do like his own variation of things, and Nick is trying to kind of mirror Victoria more.
Yeah. Both couples made a change when the music changed.
Yep.
To oversimplify it. I know we talk about that a lot, like back in our storytelling episode, maybe. Music theory versus story structure. I think that was a really fun episode. Out of the choice. So they're like, okay, we were doing this vibe. The music is about to change, which means we need to do a different vibe.
So, like, they both make the right choices to contrast with what they were doing. It wouldn't really make sense for Nick and Victoria to take what they were doing and then go into what Ben and Tori are doing.
Because it would be more of the same.
And vice versa. Like, it wouldn't make sense that way.
Right.
So
sells it with his facial expression.
It's just
so fantastic. Just traumatized.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not here, but okay. Once we have the break, that really big change in the music, we're going back to what they were doing, which is more traveling. But there's a kind of more to what they were doing when they're traveling.
Yeah, they're just raising the volume and escalating. Like I am a broken record about.
Yep.
So like right there, she does that just simple like booty pop styling
on
the open whip.
And she chooses to add just some more flair into the just basic walks that she could be doing.
She's deeper into her knees.
Overall, they're keeping it fairly simple in terms of what they're doing. Like that, it's really a lot of common patterns that you see. They're just adding a little extra to it, and I think that this is a nice vibe for them. But when we go over to Nick and Victoria, have this big weight supported movement, and then they go into something, sugar push, whatever. But then we start doing some more more uncommon things, shall we say.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. They're kind of like just playing around with things a little bit more. And neither is better or worse than the other. Like it kind of depends on how inspired you're feeling with the music and with your partner. So I think that this song is very much a vibe that fits these two more than Tori and Ben. So I think that they're comfortable really like playing around and trying more things to it than Ben and Tori.
Mm-hmm. Part of what goes into the choices you make is like, who is my partner and what would allow them to shine?
Yeah.
And you're trying to together find the compromise where both of you can shine. And like we've all seen those dances where two dancers are butting heads and they're trying to like take it instead of find the middle ground. But like the magic in West Coast Swing is when two dancers of any level find that middle ground. And it's like you prove in your dancing, knowing the people that you're going to be drawing. So that way you can allow them to do their thing. Like if I were to draw Marianne Nunez in an All-American, I would lead a million underarm turns, for example, and just let her shut me up and do as much footwork as she wants in the middle of each and every one of those underarm turns, for example. And then like leading Victoria, you want to give her lots of opportunity to add as much as she wants. Whereas with Tori, wait, did I say Victoria? I meant Victoria.
You said Victoria.
Okay, cool. And then with Tori, giving her that flow, right? And then vice versa. If you're following Nick King, I don't know what is because you've followed him more than I have. So what would be if you were to draw him in an All-American?
His strength is really weight supported things. So I think that really kind of allowing yourself to like hang out in those moments where he can kind of figure out like what he wants to play around with to do something fun. Because I think out of all of the like champion leads, I see the most creative weight supported things from him.
Yeah.
And it's because he when he has follows that he knows he can do things with, they give him kind of a moment and he's like, okay, let's see what we can do with this. So that's generally
Awesome.
his strength.
And then my thought for following Ben is his phrasing is unmatched. So like that's why I really appreciate how Tori isn't adding or taking away counts from the structure of what he's leading to add her style to it, because that way it's not interrupting his overall master plan. Yeah. It's kind of like similar with Roro. Like if you draw a Roro, you just sit back and follow and cash the check, as Brandy would say. His structure is going to be perfect. Why interfere with it? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I would say that a big difference between Nick and Ben is that Ben does go with structure, and I think Nick has like a vague structure in mind that he wants to go with, but he really just kind of lets things go as they may, more so than like Ben or like Roro.
Right. Kyle is similar. He's very intuitive and really just goes from pairs of counts to pairs of counts. Like he dances in triples.
We have another like pretty big transition into a verse, right? So we're calming it back down again. And they're kind of taking that last part kind of before the break to really escalate things a little bit more with the weight supported move that she does. Into some like fourth things. They're kind of doing a similar thing again where they're like hitting by stopping and then starting to move again, as Victoria and Nick did that big circular weight supported move and then kind of chilled it out a little bit. Are like kind of playing with some things. And this is more so about the angle that they're doing than them really doing a ton in terms of like weight support. Like Victoria does that slide, but like the rest of it, excuse me, the rest of it, it looks more amped up because they have a different angle to it, but not necessarily because of what they're actually doing.
Yeah, there are like really like illusions, as it were, of changes that you can make that either can increase or decrease the intensity without you actually having to dance harder or dance lighter, for example. With Ben and Tori, because this is the second song they've danced in this spotlight, they're dancing to less of this song than Nick and Victoria are. So this is the last section we have for them.
But I mean, they're being consistent with what they're doing. They're still doing kind of that difference in doing traveling and then stopping and kind of hitting some things. So they're like both pairings are like really hitting things and doing it so in a pretty sharp manner. They're just doing it differently. Like Nick and Victoria are doing it in a movement manner, and Tori and Ben are doing it when they're actually stopping. I like the choice because we're in the second verse, right? So we don't want to be doing too much, but we want to make it still different than like the first verse where they were kind of just chilling out a little bit.
We'll keep playing this time so we can see the last two sections that Nick and Victoria get that Ben and Tori didn't because the song faded out.
This is a nice transition. There's a nice build to it because of the way that Victoria drops into that turn.
Fall back to how the dance started, but it's a more escalated version of it with them both squatting.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier, where I was saying that, excuse me, that with Ben and Tori, he was doing kind of a version of what Tori was doing, but Nick is kind of more mirroring what Victoria is doing. I think it's fine because I think it's something, you know, like they both can do well enough that it will look nice if they're doing one and then the other. That's like an important piece of if you're going to be doing some like back and forth and mirroring or whatnot. Like you need to be able to do it well enough so that the audience can tell what you're doing and your partner can tell what you're doing.
Right. Package up some takeaways in some easily digestible format. So back to the definitions. So technique is how you do something. The choices are the thing that you're doing. And in West Coast swing, what is one of the reasons why we all love it so much is there's a broad variety of techniques that still fall under correct as an umbrella. Better a dancer you are, the more techniques you should be adding to your toolbox so you can have more choices available to you to be able to like make a different choice than maybe you normally do, but still have the technique to back it up. And ideally, especially at the All-Star and Champ levels, like we should all agree that the technique of what's on the floor, yeah, awesome. We're now just mainly talking about choices.
Right. Pretty much.
Yeah. Ideally in a perfect world. And so one thing to keep in mind as an individual when you're wanting to improve your dancing is to be consistent with the kind of technique that you're working on. So, for example, if you're just like, there's just something wrong with my anchor, you need to understand which anchor you're trying to accomplish in order to get accurate help with it. Whereas if you're not specific about which anchor you're trying to accomplish, you may go to teacher A, teacher B, teacher C, a million teachers. And because you're not all talking about the same anchor technique, you're going to get real confused real fast.
Yeah.
I speak from experience. And then understanding, especially like in a competition situation, Jack and Jill's happen in it, and it is possible to roadmap and determine someone's or strengths mid dance, like we talked about with Roro and Tren in their True Jack and Jill, for example.
Right.
But a lot of the times at the higher levels, you're going to know who you're dancing with, and to really understand what their strengths are, so you can support them and find a middle ground instead of butting heads.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that like in both of these dances that we were looking at, I think they both did a really good job of playing to their strengths.
Yep. Agreed.
And it created two totally different dances to the same song.
Mm-hmm.
If we were watching it on mute, like, and watching them side by side, like you would think that they were dancing to something totally different. In terms of their personal styles, it very much fits in this looks different than a different music genre for them. So
yeah, we can tell they're not dancing to blues, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And all of them have different looks for that, like for blues. It's something that you could tell if you were looking at it for them, which is not always the case. But generally, when you get to the higher levels, that is the case, is that you can typically tell what genre is being danced with, not listening to the actual music. I wish you should. And so, anyways, the way you interpret it, it's all up to you.
Yeah. If anybody else has wants us to do a similar video to this, comparing two spotlights to the same song, just let us know in the comments what those two videos are. This kind of direct comparison can be helpful. Yeah, we'll be back sometime after Boogie.
Yeah.
I think that's
it.
That's all, folks.
Yeah.
Yes, as always, we will be back during spooky season.
Yeah. We'll see you then. Timestamps, right?
Yes, and I have them marked, and I even have them labeled, so I don't have to refer to the notes.
Of it today.
I know. It's the one time this week. This week has felt cursed. Ever since, like the past 7 days. I don't know about anybody else. It is currently Thursday, September 28th. If anybody watching this on YouTube is like, yeah, last week has been cursed, let us know in the comments.